welcome everybody to a great presentation I think we've put together today. Carlos is our guest presenter, straight from Microsoft out there in New York. He's worked with the FAST group for several years prior to working here directly with Microsoft. And Carlos, I think, really brings a unique perspective from internally within Microsoft as to how SharePoint can be used in the public sector. But I think that message also carries across to public-facing websites, because when we're talking public sector in regards to this presentation, we're particularly looking at public websites and extranets as well. But it also carries, I think, into non-profit organizations as well. So I hope this information can kind of carry over between those different organizations. And then this is Josh Noble. Anybody that's watched these webcasts in the past has probably heard me speaking a time or two. So we'll dive right into it. Carlos, if we want to change slides. And just to give you a little overview of what we'll be going through, so we'll lay a bit of the groundwork of how SharePoint can really cater to public service organizations and different public organizations. We'll go through and kind of lay a background about what are extranets and how can public organizations leverage those. We'll look at what Microsoft has particularly done to service these organizations, and we'll take a deeper dive, particularly into the search side of these websites, to look at how search can be used to connect organizations with communities. So we'll dive right into it. So every government, non-government, and nonprofit organization really has a different set of needs in order to serve the community and achieve mission objectives. And SharePoint, as we mentioned, can really serve as a platform to meet these very diverse needs. So, your public website should really be the go-to place for showcasing your services, educating communities, and attracting donors. So, as you'll see in these examples as we go further, SharePoint really provides a platform for storing, organizing, and collaborating with content, while additions such as, say, Fast Search and Ontolica Search, whether that's on top of base SharePoint or Fast, really provide rich search experiences to communicate to communities and really bring people to content. So by effectively showcasing your services, you can really raise awareness and connect donors and advocates with your particular mission. Going through a couple of these different areas I have bullet pointed here, by connecting departments and affiliate organizations, SharePoint really offers a one-stop place and a really easy-to-use portal for collaborating on content and really reducing waste across organizations. Search happens to be probably one of the biggest drivers for this. If your people can confidently leverage a simple search interface to find their resources in big mountains of data, then they can really stop wasting time by trying to be librarians and start really helping communities. Now, that's, of course, assuming that you're not actually a librarian. In that case, we're helping you in that way. So, touching on a couple of the other brief points, SharePoint is much of a social networking platform as it is a place to collaborate with documents. So, consequently, it can be used to not only connect people with your message, but also connect people to other people within your community. You can use SharePoint on extranets as a community meeting place to share ideas and really an easily accessible public forum. And then finally, to point on a point I touched on earlier, there are no public sector and nonprofit organizations that achieve their mission on their own. You have networks of partnering services, partner organizations, and vendors. So, for example, if you are a police department and there's also a women's shelter in your area, you probably have a mutual objective to reduce domestic violence. Well, a lot of times the police systems and the public or the women's shelter systems would be disconnected. Why not use SharePoint as one potential place that you can collaborate and share information between those different organizations to better fight for particular objectives? So that's kind of my message on SharePoint is a high level. So we'll hand it over to Carlos at this point to dive in to a bit more specific examples. So Carlos, I'll let you kind of take the reins from here.
Excellent. Thank you, Josh. I guess I can't emphasize enough that these 6 bullet points that Josh has up on the screen are extremely important. And in fact, they kind of represent the first step towards solving some of the problems that public sector companies, divisions, groups have on a regular basis, where really part of what they're trying to solve is, it's a three-pronged issue that a lot of companies have as well, but only becomes much worse in the public sector. And the three problems are the growth of information. There's an incredible growth of information going on. Every year, the amount of data that's being created and stored is only getting greater. And of course, with all that information, you need to have a way to find it. So search becomes extremely important to that. And finally, the inability to be able to keep up with the need for new processes. Right? What we discover very quickly as we attempt to apply technology to the problem of this explosion of content is that we're unable to keep up with the pace of change. Right? So we want to be able to apply tools that not only help us today, but that have the capacity to handle a lot of that volume tomorrow, both to be able to allow us to store the content and to be able to retrieve it in a very clean fashion. Now, when we talk about extranets and public sector extranets, we're really talking about websites that are connected to partners, vendors, customers, basically the citizenry. The idea is you want to create really not so much a place where people can go to search for information, but a place where the search experience makes it possible for the people using the site to find what they want with the least amount of effort. Now, there's always going to be some level of effort, but the more that search can be applied to the problem of finding particular information, the easier the site becomes to use. Now, an extranet, of course, is any sort of site that allows for the dissemination of internal information to the public, whether it's through password-protected sites or through anonymously accessed sites. Now, so an extranet, in effect, is typically on the internet, and it's a matter of how the authentication is set up as to how many people will actually get to use the site. Now, I only have a couple of more slides that I want to get through quickly, and then I want to jump right into a couple of sites to show you the sorts of things that are being done right now. Now, certainly we believe that SharePoint is a great way to go in the creation of extranet and intranet sites, and it's primarily for a lot of the things that people already recognize Office for, which is that authoring is made easy, there's a compelling user experience, and it's a familiar platform. Right? Practically everyone understands the Office interface. The creation of documents using Word or OneNote or Excel is extremely easy for the vast majority of people. SharePoint certainly presents a compelling user experience, and because it is a platform, it means that you can create sites that are a lot more robust, a lot more interactive, and leverages the experience of your resources, right? The people who already know SharePoint, who simply want to begin using it in more of a fashion that allows for greater user experience. And of course, it is a familiar unified platform. So from the perspective of digital marketing, sometimes it's hard to imagine how digital marketing might match up to public sector and the use of dissemination of information to the public. But the fact is that in order for the public to take the most advantage of the information from these sites, they have to know that it's available. And in addition to knowing that the information is available, it has to be available in a way that the users will want to continue coming back to use the site to continue accessing that information. So a lot of the standard things that SharePoint supplies, right, web content control, search, social computing, control of digital assets, collaboration, and so on, become incredibly important, both for making sure that that the users of the website are finding what they want, but also to create communities, to increase the reach of the site to the people who really need it the most. So from a pure search perspective, where we take a look at the content that's stored within a search engine, typically how we view things is that the closer that the workflow is to what someone is looking for, the more transparent search becomes. So that if someone decides that they want to look for example, real estate risk, they would start out with a very simple query, and rather than getting a standard search result, what they get instead is a very information-rich experience, where in addition to the initial query, they can receive very specific research about that query, information about customers, metadata or filters that allow them to quickly narrow down the information that they're looking for, or to give them a very high-level overview of the information that's been returned. In addition, federation is supported. You want to be able to bring in information from other sites as well, not necessarily kept within the search engine, so that things like news and external opinions can be displayed on the page to allow the user, again, to leverage the information that's being displayed. And in this case, be able to leverage information about experts. Who can help you find more information about what it is you're looking for? All right, so this particular slide is a great example of the transparency of search, where the more the application supports what the user is looking for, the less the user notices that search is there. And it's very important that we view the ultimate iterative evolution of search as one where, in effect, it becomes invisible. So finally, I want to jump into the first website, which is recovery.gov, and I have a slide for it, mainly so that I can show you a couple of points about it, specific to the user search experience. So on one hand, part of what recovery.gov brings is the notion of profile and personalization. Right? It automatically, right from the outset, begins to aggregate information in ways that make sense to different users. If you're just an interested citizen, if you're a user of data, if you're a member of the press, if you're a recipient of grant money, what sort of areas you want to go to, and that is the start of quickly narrowing down the site to make it useful to the user. In addition, the notion of social bookmarks means that you can share it with other people as you find information that you're looking for that you know may be of some import to others. And finally, the notion of social integration, where you can connect on Facebook, Twitter, YouTube, Flickr, and so on to find the information that you're looking for and be able to share it with others. So let's jump over now to the true recovery.gov site. Now, what's interesting about recovery.gov as a standalone site is the fact that it took only 10 weeks to create the entire site, and all the sites I'll be showing you are built on SharePoint 2010. So they were able to bring it on time and on budget. Now, recovery.gov is a site that, to start with, has a starting notion of personalization and customization, allows you to quickly jump to different areas. But an interesting aspect of recovery.gov is that it allows you to see where funding being handed out by the federal government is going. So, for example, to Pennsylvania, to New York, to Vermont. Or, if you like, you can quickly jump down to a particular zip code. In this case, I'm entering 10019, which happens to be the zip code for the Microsoft office here in New York. And what this does is it opens up a map of the United States, and using the zip code, quickly does some geolocation, pulls up all the information available for grants within the 10019 zip code, and narrows down to the particular neighborhood where the funding is. Every dot represents a grant, and by clicking on one of the dots, so for example, the blue dots represent grants, shows that, for example, the New York City Opera received $50,000. Another was the Sesame Workshop received $1 million. A green dot is contracts that were awarded. So the Hearst Corporation, for example, received $128,000. If we wanted to get additional information about that particular contract, we can see that the money was actually subcontracted to Oprah Magazine, and the sub was for the initial amount. Now, because we're using geolocation, part of what we can do is move the map around to take a look at other areas of the city where we can see additional funding. For example, a purple dot is simply a loan that was made, in this case, to Action USA. This information can be seen in a number of different ways, either at a funding level, by state, congressional district, county, or zip, or street level by state, district, county, or zip, or an area level. And all of this is using search to find the information rapidly and use geolocation to display the information on the screen. Now, at a more standard way of using search is treasury.gov, where they do have the notion of social networking. So they've got blogs, and they do have connections to YouTube, Facebook, Twitter, and MySpace. And of course, the site really leverages the notion of the user experience to entice users to continue using the site. But let's say, for example, that I want to get information on mortgages. So I go to the advanced search, to the search box and just type mortgages to bring up what, in fact, is a pretty standard search page. Now, because of the fact that it's using 2010 with Fast Search Server, what we have is, in addition to the standard result in the middle, made up of various blue links with a teaser where the word can be found and highlighted, it also shows the filters based on metadata extracted from the documents. So things like person names. Tim Geithner's name appears 68 times in the result, and the result, as we can see over on the right-hand side, is 7,106 documents. Tim Geithner's name appears 68 times. Tim Masad 23 times, Neil Wallen 18, and so on. And that's an exact count. So this gives the users an immediate view of what sort of information is available to them. In addition, we have things like showing topics that are available for people to narrow their search down on. They can enter date ranges, different offices or geographies, and so on. Now, a site that happens to be one of my favorite sites is the NHS evidence site. Now, this happens to take search almost to its furthest point, as we've seen in many external sites, and that is making search the center of the page, right? Everything about the site, fundamentally, when a patient comes to this site, is to discover information about healthcare. So, for example, if someone wanted to get more information on lupus, for example, the system automatically gives them hints as to what is available in the system. So if they wanted to look something up on lupus, they could simply, by typing 3 letters, get to lupus erythematosus. Now, let's say instead that we wanted to find out more about chronic obstructive pulmonary disease. So I can simply select that from the drop-down, and that brings me to a result page that again, has a wealth of information. In addition to the search results that normally come up, again, the link to a document, some teaser information that has the terms highlighted, they also supply documents, again, found by search that give you an introduction to the disease, guidance on it, information that the public might be interested in, and of course, ongoing research into the disease. Now, if someone happened to hear something about how PDE4 inhibitors have an impact on chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, they can type in PDE4 inhibitor, for example, run that and find that, yes, they have a number of documents here, right? And notice that PDE, which stands for phosphodiesterase, in fact shows up in the documents that we're looking for. So PDE is already set up as a synonym on the site, again, to assist the users to be able to find the information that they want as quickly as possible. Now, if we take this another level, this is where we go to the Getty Images site. And while this is not a public sector site, it's a great example of some of the things that can be done using search. So, for example, if we wanted to be able to show someone videos or photos related to safety, I can go ahead and type safety in the search box and notice how the system automatically gives me a selection of different items related to safety. And notice that not all of them start with the word safety. Safety is simply somewhere inside of the term, and in some of them it's not even there. So, for example, reflective clothing, protective workwear does not even have the term safety, but safety is in the synonym list for that particular term. So, for example, I wanted to look at car seats. It immediately shows me a selection of photos to go with that, and let's say that I just wanted to see the ones with no people in them because I just want to see the car seats. That quickly uses that metadata to narrow down the field of search to show me more of what I want. And of course, I can narrow that down even more by selecting things like care, baby goods, baby bottle, and so on. But this just shows you the power of the search experience. It isn't just search. But you want to be able to amass all of the information needed by your users, by vendors, partners, by the general public, and help them to find what they want quickly. Because really the watchword here is transparency. And the more you can make the information that you have transparent, the happier your users will be, the more the information becomes valuable, and certainly the fewer complaints you will have over time over what sort of information they're looking for. So I'll quickly jump to my last slide. So what does the future look like? Well, certainly nothing is harder to look at than the future, but the one thing we can tell you that is on the roadmap for digital marketing is the notion of increasing business intelligence capabilities within the SharePoint platform and search, being able to add additional information on what's known as media and advertising, but in fact is really more about tracking what your users are doing on the site and how to keep them engaged and get them the information that they want, so that when you're creating extranets and intranets, your users will feel that the sites are actually useful to them. Right? And the use of SharePoint as a platform means that the site management becomes a lot more consistent. The use of tools for business intelligence, technology management, business management, and digital marketing become much more consistent so that you can leverage that in the skill set of your resources. And with that, I will hand it back to Josh. Thank you very much. I certainly will be around to answer questions once we're both done.
Yeah, and I was going to mention that. It's something we usually mention at the beginning, but if you have any questions that you've kind of jotted down at this point, make sure to start typing them into the chat. We only have a couple more slides here, and then after we'll open it up to QA to really go through and answer any particular live questions that you have. So start thinking those up, and we can really cover anything that you'd like to in that SharePoint, especially in the search atmosphere. I want to just take step out for just a second to look also at Ontolica and how Ontolica mashes up with this whole message. So, as many of you know that are attending, Ontolica is a series of web parts and a series of modules that integrate in with MOS 2007, SharePoint 2010, or FAST. And Ontolica can really be used as a way to further enhance these experiences, whether we need to add additional functionality such as preview capability that will work on any website, or if we want to customize the search experience without ever touching XML or anything like that. So this particular site I wanted to show you is a great example of the Department of Healthcare Services. Now, they are on MOS 2007, and this is particularly shown because it's a bit more of a basic deployment. All the skinning, all the nice branding has been taken away, but you can see SharePoint is the core of this particular solution. And I think they have a really interesting story. So over the last couple of years, the state of California took on an initiative to make it easier for the public to find policies and available services around their publicly funded health care. So the problem is they were met with real big challenges around limited human resources, time, and funding. So in order to meet their objective and connect the public with information on their Medi-Cal services, they leveraged both SharePoint and then Ontolica to make it very, very easy to customize the search experience. In this case, Ontolica really greatly reduced the deployment timelines and the resource demands by providing simple tools. After the successful pilot program that you can see just in the snapshot here, the state of California DHCS is actually right now working on adding new additional Ontolica features to this site, but also rolling out Ontolica into new locations in order to further connect their public with content. So moving away from something that looks just like SharePoint, where you can really see the underlying engine here, we'll go to something that's a bit more customized. So if we want to go to the final slide here. This is the New Zealand Citizens Advice Bureau. What you'll see here is this is a very nicely branded, nicely customized site. And again, they built this search result interaction with Ontolica. These drop downs, these quick filters, they sit on top of SharePoint and have built these all out. And again, they were met with similar challenges. They didn't have a lot of deployment timeline. In fact, a lot of the services that they received to build out this site were completely donated. So again, really great example of how you can use search and further use Ontolica to build out these customized search experiences. And again, in no way is this is actually completely supplemental to SharePoint, whether it's MOS 07 Fast or SharePoint 2010, and makes it easier to build out those experiences. So with that, we'll wrap up here. I think got one more slide. I guess final slide here. I've shown you just a couple examples of sites that are using Ontolica on top of SharePoint, but there's a whole lot of government organizations around the world that are using Ontolica, whether it's for their public-facing website, extranet, or intranet. So just a quick snapshot of some of the public organizations that are using that. So I'd like to open up to questions at this point. Carlos and I can answer anything around SharePoint, Fast, public deployments, Ontolica, you name it. So if you want to, anybody has any questions to enter into the chat, we'll start addressing those now. I should also mention that the slides for this presentation are already available on SlideShare. I'll actually copy the URL and send that into the chat here. And then anybody that's registered for this webcast will receive the recording of the webcast, usually on Monday, with, again, the connection to those slides. So I know we jumped through a lot of information very, very quickly, so you will have that available to you.
And also, of course, you do have our email addresses, so please don't be shy about sending questions directly to us if there's something specifically you'd like to know more about.
I haven't gotten any questions yet in the chat. I was going to send. I'm sending out the link to the SlideShare deck in the chat right now, so everybody will have access to that. Very silent usually. We've either lost everybody or everybody's so deeply enthralled with the information. All right. Well, we'll kind of end it there then. Carlos and I will hang on for a couple extra minutes. If anybody happens to still be writing questions in the chat, I'm more than happy to. Got a question here. What part of the last slide is specific to Ontolica? So the actual search experience. So Carlos, if we want to click back, I guess it'd be 2 slides from now. So the Citizens Advice Bureau, Edwin, is that what you're speaking about? On this particular deployment? Yeah, so on this particular deployment, everything that you see in the gray box there, from enter the search terms here all the way over to the search, the actual search box itself, that was all built out with Ontolica. Now, what you're seeing in this particular deployment, if you got into XML and XSLT, you could build the same experience out within Fast or base SharePoint. But the bar or what's been applied here allowed them to really deploy that very easily. There was no XML coding or anything like that involved. It was all done through a graphical user interface. And I think that's something that carries into a lot of other different deployments. Say you want to build out things such as visual best bets and customize refiners on the fly and things like that. You don't always necessarily have development resources or technical resources on hand to do that. So Ontolica provides a complete graphical interface for interacting and building out any of those experiences. Hope that. Yeah, so Edwin asked, so the Ontolica is an add-on to quickly make the user interface components. And yes, that's probably half the benefit of Ontolica right there, especially Ontolica Search, is building out those user interfaces. There are a lot of additional capabilities that it brings, in particular, say, document preview, web page preview components that'll work on any file type. There's also different types of auto-suggest, audience targeting features, workflow and result action features. So we have plenty of examples of those on different sites. I just wanted to make sure here we were talking about actual public-facing ones. Public sector deployments. He's asking, Edwin's asking, what's the source of the auto-suggest? So Ontolica has its own database cube that gathers up all sorts of information about what people are looking for, what they're actually clicking on, what they're searching for and not able to find. And a lot of that information we derive from our Mondo search engine that that's been available on the web for a decade and a half probably at this point. So that database cube, again, gathers up all that information, and it begins to push suggestions to users. So things such as drop-down auto-suggest, or things kind of like the Amazon-style related queries. It pushes that to users to connect them to their content faster. And it's doing that all off of the user's actual experience on the site. An interesting thing to note also about that is those auto-suggests can be catered to a particular user. So instead of just providing one set of auto-suggestions for the whole site, you can actually recognize, okay, this user is logged in this region of the country, or this user is logged in from this particular department, and provide them more tailored search suggestions. Yeah, Edwin, that's one of the options that you can set. So the question was, so the intelligence is also derived from the content, so you won't wind up with zero results. Yes. So one of the options that you can set on the auto-suggest functionality is to only provide suggestions that also return results. The BI also that's feeding that auto-suggestion, it's really great to be able to use that and then feed in to create new things such as synonyms, best bets, things like that do take a bit more of a manual interaction. But the way that Ontolica's graphical user interface is set up for customizing those things, you can feed those reports to, say, a marketing team, and they can easily build those. So I haven't gotten any more questions at this point. Carlos, do you have anything else you wanted to chime in on?
No, not at all. In fact, just the fact that out of the box, SharePoint does give you partial functionality like that, because you're right, the Ontolica product actually gives a much more extended version of the type ahead feature, which is actually a great capability to have. Having that sort of customization per location or per user makes for a much better user experience. And in the end, it's always going to be about the user experience now. Exactly.
Yeah, so if you're not connecting people to the right content, people don't want to upload things to SharePoint in the first place. But I think that's the spiel we get every time we're talking about SharePoint on the internet and usability and metadata tagging and things like that.
Exactly. It's all about usability now. It really should not be just about search or just about the experience. It really is. It's about usability. The search experience is what matters. I expect we'll see more and more of that sort of thing as time goes by, especially since Microsoft is obviously committed to giving enterprise search the front and center attention that it deserves within SharePoint.
Yeah, I think that's something really big to highlight is the focus on search. Even over the last couple of years, I remember the SPC a couple of years ago out there in Vegas. Search was just kind of a low-level priority for most companies, and now they've really started to recognize, okay, we really need to connect our people to this information faster. Search is the first place people are going when they want to interact with our sites, our extranets, our intranets. So it's definitely been recognized for sure by Microsoft, and then also the user communities that search is the key driver to that information.
Yep.
All right. Well, if there aren't any other questions, we will. Oh, there we go. One more. The SharePoint search feels kind of heavy. Response is not sub-zero like GSA or autonomy. Why is that? Carlos, that's actually probably, can you see that, see the chat message? That's probably a good question for you.
No, I don't see it. Could you just read it, please?
Oh, yeah. It says, Edwin asks, the SharePoint search feels kind of heavy. Responses are not sub-zero like GSA or autonomy.
Right. Well, SharePoint search has never been a speed demon. The whole idea of using fast is because of the fact that you get the sort of scalability that you can only get from a search engine at that level. So fast will almost always give you sub-second response time, which is why we typically recommend it to customers now. That's not to say the SharePoint search can't give you sub-second response time, just that there are a number of aspects that conspire to make it go slower, right? Not the least of which is the collection of metadata and additional security filtering. So the recommendation we always have now is if speed is an issue, and certainly when you're building an internet site, speed is always an issue. We always recommend fast search because that both gives you the speed you're looking for at a cost that's much more reasonable than everyone was used to paying when they were purchasing fast standalone. And again, if there are any other questions, you have our email address, so please feel free to send any additional questions by email, and then we'll get back to you as soon as we can.
I got a question here from Michael. How do you populate synonyms for suggestions? And Michael, that's done two different ways. One is automatically with that database cube. In Fast and base SharePoint do that fairly similar. They do have a cube that tracks that sort of information. Ontolica does it in far greater detail. Again, that way we can provide more tailored search suggestions. The other way that you would connect those is you can manually go in and add synonyms. So an example for that would be maybe I recognize that a lot of my documents are have a country code USA in them, but I recognize based off of the search reports that people are searching for the terms United States of America, U.S. They're not necessarily searching for the term USA. So I can look at those reports and I can recognize, hey, there's some trends here. I probably want to go in and manually make some of those suggestions. So you can go in and actually do synonyms. You can build visual best bets to drive people to particular content. And so you do have kind of a mix between automated suggestions with, say, auto-suggest related queries, things like that, and then manual input of suggestions. And in using the mix of those really allow you to both reduce time that you're spending customizing that experience, but also drive people to the right content. I'm more than happy to talk to you about that in more detail and how that would apply to your particular deployment. Oh, the other question then is it SharePoint as far as click-through or Ontolica? It again depends on what platform you're talking about. With the Ontolica auto suggestions, there is a Ontolica-based cube that is tracking that information. It's not necessarily feeding the from the click-through information of base SharePoint. It has a separate process that's going in place. Good questions. It sounds like best bets, auto suggestions, things like that are a big area of focus here on these public-facing deployments. We'll have to do a presentation specifically on that. All right. Well, I haven't gotten any other questions. I think we had a really good discussion here. Again, all the recordings, the SlideShare presentation, that will all go out on Monday. So if you've registered for it, make sure to keep an eye out for that. The slide deck is already available on SlideShare, and so I did put that into the chat. And then again, please do not hesitate to contact Carlos and I directly. We're more than happy to speak with you about different areas. I know that I pitch Ontolica a lot. Obviously, I have a little vested interest in that, but more than also happy to connect you to the right industry experts in different areas. So don't be afraid to contact us in those particular areas. If you are talking about even fast and you're not talking just public sector, Carlos knows pretty much everybody at Microsoft will connect you in with the right people to talk to. So make sure. Maybe not everyone, but close. Everybody just knows you, Carlos. Well, great. We'll wrap it up again. Carlos, appreciate the time today, and I appreciate everybody joining.
Yes, thank you all very much. This was a great opportunity. Thank you very much for coming over and listening in.
Everybody have a great weekend.